While the mother was showering, she had no idea that her daughter had quietly slipped outside to buy a second ice cream from the truck parked across the street. When she called out for her and received no response, a sense of unease began to grow, and as minutes stretched into hours with no trace of the little girl, the parents knew something terrible had happened. The only clue left behind was the Ring camera footage showing their daughter, ice cream in hand, walking back across the street. For years, the parents lived with the torment of not knowing what had happened to her, and the mother was haunted by guilt over having left her alone for just that brief moment. But then, on one fateful day, the father happened to be at a junkyard when he caught sight of an old ice cream truck, a discovery that would change the entire case and lead them to uncover the horrifying truth behind their daughter's disappearance. Before we dive into this shocking story, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe. James Carter, as he is now known, pulled into his driveway after another exhausting 12-hour shift at the construction site. His shoulders ached from the physical labor, and all he wanted was to collapse onto the sofa with a cold beer. The house looked the same as always, the pale yellow, paint starting to chip around the edges. The garden that his wife Emily had once tended with such care, now maintained, but lacking its former vibrancy. Everything had changed after Lily vanished. He turned off the engine and sat for a moment, gathering his energy before heading inside. The house felt different these days, emptier and quieter, haunted by the absence of their little girl's laughter. "Honey, I'm home," James called out as he stepped through the front door, dropping his keys into the ceramic bowl on the entryway table. His voice echoed through the house, met only by silence. "Emily," he called again, slipping off his work boots and making his way upstairs. The bedroom door was partially open, and through the gap he could see his wife sitting at her work table by the window. Her back was to him, shoulders hunched, her attention completely focused on something in front of her. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the room, highlighting the silver strands in her once fully brown hair, aging that had accelerated in the years since Lily disappeared. James approached cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "Hi," he said softly. Emily jumped slightly, turning to face him with wide eyes, as if she had been caught doing something forbidden. "James, I didn't hear you come in." "Sorry, didn't mean to scare you," she replied, as he leaned down to kiss her cheek, noticing the slight puffiness around her eyes that indicated she had been crying. "What are you doing?" he asked gently. "Just researching," she said, her fingers nervously tapping the edge of the table. "I just got off the phone with Officer Daniels." James's heart sank. Officer Daniels had been the lead detective on Lily's case, or had been until the case went cold after a year of dead ends. Now he only called with courtesy updates, usually with nothing new to report. "What did he say?" James asked, even though he already knew the answer. Emily hesitated, then looked down at her lap. It was then that James noticed the tablet resting there, its screen illuminated with a familiar image that made his chest tighten. It was the Ring camera footage from their front porch, the last known recording of their daughter, 8-year-old Lily beaming in her favorite pink Hello Kitty dress, holding out a melting strawberry ice cream cone as she opened the door, as if eager to share her joy. Her mother's voice could be heard faintly from inside. Moments later, Lily stepped off the porch and out of view, vanishing before anyone could understand how or why. James sighed heavily, recognizing Emily's old habit resurfacing. "Emily, you're watching it again," he said as she paused the video, her finger hovering over the screen. "I just feel like I'm missing something. If I watch it one more time, maybe I'll notice something new." The police have reviewed that footage hundreds of times. Professional analysts have gone over every frame. James ran a hand through his thinning hair. "This isn't healthy, honey. You can't keep torturing yourself like this." "Don't tell me what's healthy," Emily snapped sharply. "This is our daughter we're talking about. Someone needs to keep looking." "The police are still looking. Are they really?" Her eyes flashed with anger and pain. "It's been 6 years, James, 6 years." They had moved on to other cases, or so it seemed. If they had a child who vanished, they wouldn't stop looking either. James felt his patience wearing thin, exhaustion from work compounding with the familiar frustration of this recurring argument. And what exactly do you think you're going to find that trained investigators couldn't? He asked. I don't know, Emily replied, standing up as the tablet fell onto the bed. But I can't just go about my day pretending she didn't exist. That's not fair. I'm not pretending she didn't exist, he replied, lowering his voice and trying to stay calm. But there's a difference between remembering our daughter and obsessing over her disappearance to the point where you can't live your life. What life, James? What life do I have without her? Emily's voice cracked. Our life, the one we still need to live. James gestured around them. Bills still need to be paid, the house still needs to be maintained, and I still need to go to work every day. And when I come home, I need my wife to be present. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she spoke softly. To be present, he repeated firmly, understanding that their grief could not consume everything. The argument hung in the air between them, neither willing to back down. Finally, James turned away, grabbing his wallet from the dresser. Where are you going? Emily asked in a small, trembling voice. To do something that actually matters, he said, immediately regretting the harshness of his words, then softening his tone. I saw an advertisement for a sedan at Thompson's salvage yard. Our car is on its last legs, and that repair bill would cost more than the car is worth. The ad just went up a few hours ago, so there's a good chance I can get it if I go now. Emily wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to start another argument. James's shoulders slumped. I'm sorry too. I know this is hard for you, and it's hard for me too, just in a different way. He crossed the room and gently pulled her into his arms, and they stood like that for a moment, two people adrift in the same storm. The salvage yard isn't far, he added. I'll take the bus. Emily nodded against his chest, whispering, be careful. As James headed down the stairs, he felt the familiar weight of their shared grief pressing down on him. Sometimes he wondered if they would ever find their way back to each other, back to who they were before that sunny day 6 years ago when their world shattered. The bus ride to Thompson's salvage yard took about 20 minutes, carrying James through progressively more industrial parts of town. The yard sat on the outskirts, surrounded by a tall chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. A faded sign reading Thompson's Auto Salvage and Junkyard hung crookedly over the entrance gate. As James stepped off the bus, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gravel lot. Heat shimmered off the piles of rusted metal and discarded vehicles that filled the yard like a mechanical graveyard. The air smelled of oil, rubber, and hot metal. A bell jingled as James pushed open the door to the small office at the front of the property, where a heavy-set man with graying hair and oil-stained overalls looked up from behind a cluttered desk. Help you? The man asked, setting aside what appeared to be an inventory ledger. I'm here about the sedan you advertised online, James replied. Posted just a few hours ago. The man's face brightened with recognition. The '09 Toyota. You're the first to come see it. Name's George Thompson. I own the place. He extended a calloused hand. James Carter, he said. They shook hands briefly. Can I take a look at it? James asked. Sure thing, George replied, grabbing a ring of keys from a hook on the wall and leading James through a side door into the yard. The sedan sat among a row of other vehicles in various states of disrepair. It was dusty and had clearly seen better days, but it looked mostly intact from a distance. As they got closer, however, James noticed significant dents along the driver's side and a crack running across the windshield. The front end's in decent shape, George said, popping the hood. Engine's salvageable. The previous owner got sideswiped, and insurance declared it totaled, but there's plenty of life left in her. James leaned in to examine the engine. He wasn't a mechanic, but he knew enough to spot obvious problems. The engine looked relatively clean, but he noticed several components that would need replacement. He circled the car, noting the extensive body damage and worn tires. What are you asking for it? James asked, though he was already having serious doubts. George named a price that was lower than James expected, but still more than he thought the car was worth in its current condition. Mind if I see the paperwork, service history, title, that sort of thing? James inquired. No problem, George said. Let me grab that from the office. It might take a few minutes to dig it out. Left alone, James decided to look around at the other vehicles in the yard, thinking there might be something else in better condition that hadn't been listed yet. He wandered through rows of cars, trucks, and vans, some missing wheels, others missing entire front ends. The late afternoon sun cast an almost golden glow across the metal landscape, giving the junkyard an oddly beautiful, apocalyptic appearance. As James turned a corner into a more secluded section at the far end of the yard, he stopped abruptly, his body going rigid as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. There, partially hidden behind a rusted delivery van, sat an ice cream truck, but not just any ice cream truck. This one was painted in distinctive pink and blue swirls, with a large fiberglass ice cream cone mounted on its roof. Even faded by years of exposure to the elements, the colors and design were unmistakable. James's mind flashed back to the police station 6 years ago, watching security camera footage from a corner store near their home. The grainy black and white video had shown an ice cream truck parked across the street. Moments later, a small figure, Lily, had approached it. It was the last confirmed sighting of his daughter before she disappeared. That truck had been a crucial lead. The police had put out alerts for it across 3 states, but it had seemingly vanished until now. James's heart pounded in his chest as he moved closer, examining the truck from all angles. The distinctive paint job, the oversized ice cream cone topper. It matched the description from the police reports perfectly. Even the placement of the service window on the side aligned with what he remembered from the security footage. Finding something interesting, James jumped at the sudden sound of George's voice behind him. Standing there with a manila folder in hand and eyebrows raised in question, George said, "How long have you had it?" in reference to the truck. James strained his voice. This truck, his voice trembled. "It's been a while now. I need to know exactly when you got it and who you got it from," he demanded more forcefully than he intended. George's expression hardened. "Look, I can't just give out information about my customers or vehicles to strangers. Privacy policy," he replied. James stepped closer. "The paperwork for the sedan is completely forgotten now. My daughter disappeared 6 years ago. The last place she was seen was near an ice cream truck that looks exactly like this one. The police have been looking for it for years." George's eyes widened slightly, but he remained silent. "If you don't tell me what I need to know," James continued, his voice low and steady, "I'm calling the police right now, and they'll get the information anyway." A tense moment passed between them. Finally, George sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I got a couple of years back, too, maybe 3 years ago," he said, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Guy paid me to take it off his hands. Wanted it dismantled, said he was getting out of the business." "And did you dismantle it?" George shook his head. "Never got around to it. Thought the materials might be worth something. Stainless steel, interior decent, engine intact, but never found a buyer interested in ice cream truck parts. It's just been sitting here since." "Do you remember anything about the man who brought it in, his name, what he looked like?" "It was years ago," James pressed. George protested. "I get dozens of vehicles through here every month." James pulled out his phone. "Then I'm calling the police." George held up his hands in surrender. All right, let me think." He paused, brow furrowed in concentration. "I don't remember much, just that he was an African-American guy, middle-aged, maybe in his 40s or 50s, paid cash. That's about all I can recall." James stared at the truck, memories of his daughter flooding his mind. Her laughter, her voice, the way she'd beg for ice cream on hot summer days. The thought that this vehicle might be connected to her disappearance made his blood run cold. "Don't touch this truck," he ordered George, already dialing a number on his phone. "Don't let anyone near it." His fingers trembled slightly as he scrolled through his contacts, finding the number for Special Agent Smith, the FBI agent who had been assigned to Lily's case when it was still active. Over the years, they had developed a relationship of mutual respect. Even as the investigation grew cold, the phone had rung several times before Agent Smith finally answered. "Agent Smith, it's James Carter," he said. There was a brief pause before Agent Smith replied, "James, it's been a while. How are you and Emily doing?" "I think I found it," James said, cutting straight to the point. "The ice cream truck from the footage, the one they thought might have approached before she disappeared." He could hear Agent Smith shifting his tone, becoming more alert. "Where are you?" "Thompson's salvage yard on the east side of town." "The truck is here," James confirmed. Same colors, same design, with the ice cream cone on top. The owner says he got it a few years ago from a middle-aged African-American man who paid him to get rid of it. Listen carefully, Agent Smith said, his voice now professional and measured. This could be important evidence, but it needs to be handled by local PD first. I'm going to contact them now and have officers sent to your location. Don't touch anything, and make sure the junkyard owner doesn't either. Can you stay there until police arrive? Yes, of course, James replied. Good. Keep the junkyard owner there too. I'll call you back once I've dispatched officers. The call ended, and James turned back to George, who was watching him with growing concern. Police are coming, James said simply. We need to wait here. George nodded nervously. Look, man, I had no idea this truck might be connected to something serious. If I'd known, I'd have told the police when they got here. James cut him off, returning his attention to the truck. Standing in front of it, he couldn't help but picture Lily approaching this very vehicle, perhaps lured by the prospect of a sweet treat on a hot day. Had she talked to the driver? Had she gotten into the truck willingly? The questions that had tormented him and Emily for years resurfaced with painful clarity. Soon, 15 minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled into the junkyard without sirens, though their lights flashed briefly before shutting off. 4 officers emerged, their expressions serious as they assessed the situation. James recognized one of them as Officer Martinez, who had been involved in the early investigation of Lily's disappearance. Mr. Carter, Officer Martinez acknowledged with a nod before turning to the junkyard owner. You must be Mr. Thompson. I'm Officer Martinez. We need to ask you some questions about this ice cream truck. While one officer took George aside, Officer Martinez approached James. Tell me exactly what happened today, he said. James recounted how he had come to the junkyard looking for a car, wandered around while waiting for paperwork, and stumbled upon the ice cream truck. He described his conversation with George and what little information he had learned about the truck's previous owner. Agent Smith later confirmed, this matches the description of the vehicle we were looking for in your daughter's case. We've already checked our database, and there was no sale or transfer of an ice cream truck registered under the business name from the original case. If this is the same truck, it seems the owner never properly transferred or disposed of it through official channels. 2 more police cruisers arrived, and officers began setting up a perimeter around the truck with yellow crime scene tape. A female officer approached George and asked for the keys to the vehicle. George disappeared into his office and returned moments later with a set of keys, which he handed over. I've never actually opened it myself, just took the guy's word that everything inside was stripped out. The officers put on latex gloves before carefully unlocking and opening the truck's rear doors. James stood at a distance, his heart racing as they entered the vehicle with flashlights. After several tense minutes, Officer Martinez emerged from the truck and approached James. There's not much inside, some empty, damaged freezer compartments, a service counter, old wiring. Nothing immediately suspicious, but we'll need to process the entire vehicle for evidence. Our forensics team is on the way, he explained. James nodded, a mix of disappointment and hope washing over him. He had half expected, half feared, and half hoped that they would find some definitive evidence inside. You should know, Officer Martinez continued, based on a vehicle identification number and the matching description, we believe this is very likely the same truck we've been looking for all these years. James's throat tightened. So what happens now? He asked. We collect evidence, take the truck into custody, and reopen an active investigation into this lead. The junkyard owner seems cooperative. We're taking a statement now, and he's agreed to provide any security footage he has of the property. At that moment, a van with forensic services printed on its side pulled into the yard, and technicians in white coveralls began unloading equipment. James pulled out his phone. I should call Emily. Officer Martinez nodded. That's a good idea, but please ask her not to come down here. We need to work without distraction, and I'm already bending rules letting you stay. Stepping away from the activity, James dialed home. Emily answered on the first ring, as if she'd been sitting by the phone. James, is everything okay? She asked as he took a deep breath. Emily, I found something. I think I found the ice cream truck, the one the police were looking for after Lily disappeared. There was silence on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. What? Where? How? At the junkyard. I just recognized it from the security footage. The police are here, now checking it out. I'm coming there, he explained. No. Honey, the police said they need to work without distraction. They're collecting evidence. I'll tell you everything when I get home, he added. Emily's voice broke. If this is the truck, if this leads to finding out what happened to her. I know, he said softly. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. The police are taking this seriously. Agent Smith is involved again. Let them do their job, and I'll be home soon. After ending the call, James approached. One of the officers is sitting in a police cruiser who is typing on a laptop. Excuse me, have you found anything yet? James asked. The officer looked up, hesitating briefly before answering. We've just confirmed, through comparison with the original footage, that this is almost certainly the same vehicle we were looking for. The paint pattern and modifications match perfectly. What about fingerprints, DNA? Nothing obvious so far. The interior has been wiped down at some point, and years of exposure have degraded most potential evidence. But our forensics team is thorough. They'll find anything that's there to find. James then asked, and the junkyard owner, do you think he's involved somehow? The officer shook his head. Honestly, not likely. We've questioned him extensively, and he's been cooperative. He showed us all the security footage he had, though unfortunately his system only keeps recordings for 90 days, so anything from years ago is long gone. He told me the man who brought the truck in was African-American, middle-aged, James said, nodding in agreement with what the officer had just explained. According to his statement, the truck was delivered through the back entry of the junkyard, which is visible on his security cameras but too far away to make out faces clearly. We'll need to enhance the footage, but it's not promising. James ran a hand through his hair, frustration mixing with the adrenaline still coursing through his system. 6 years of dead ends and false hopes had taught him to temper his expectations, but finding the truck felt significant. It had to mean something. Mr. Carter, the officer said softly, I know this is difficult, but this is potentially a major breakthrough. We're going to do everything we can with this new evidence. James nodded, watching as the forensics team meticulously examined every inch of the ice cream truck, the vehicle that might finally provide answers about what happened to his little girl. As he stood watching, the movement at the entrance of the junkyard caught his eye. A yellow taxi had pulled up, and a familiar figure was getting out. It was Emily. His heart sank. Despite his explicit request for her to stay home, she had come anyway. Emily paid the driver and hurried toward the police tape, her eyes scanning the yard until she spotted James. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and dread as she took in the scene of police officers and crime scene technicians surrounding the ice cream truck. James quickly moved to intercept her before she could approach the active crime scene. Emily, what are you doing here? I told you not to come, he said, his tone more worried than angry. She gripped his arm tightly, her gaze fixed on the truck in the distance. I couldn't just sit at home waiting, James. Not for this. Is that really it? It is, James nodded grimly. They think so. The police have confirmed it matches the one from the security footage. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a small sob. After all this time, it was just sitting in a junkyard. How is that possible? I don't know, James admitted, putting an arm around her shoulders. The owner claims he got it a few years ago and never bothered to scrap it. Officer Martinez approached them, his expression professionally neutral, but with a hint of sympathy in his eyes. Mrs. Carter, I understand your need to be here, but this is an active investigation scene. I had to come, Emily said in a stronger voice. That truck might hold answers about my daughter. Oh, Officer Martinez nodded. I understand, but right now we need to focus on collecting evidence without contamination. The forensics team needs space to work. Have you found anything, Emily? She asked desperately. Anything at all? We're being thorough, Officer Martinez replied diplomatically. The truck was empty of personal effects, but we're checking for trace evidence, fibers, DNA, fingerprints. These things take time to process. Emily's shoulders slumped slightly, the familiar weight of disappointment settling over her again. James recognized it well. They had both experienced too many moments of raised hopes followed by crushing letdowns. What happens next with the investigation? James asked. We'll impound the truck for a more detailed forensic examination. We're also looking into the junkyard's records for any information about the person who brought it in. Agent Smith is reactivating resources for your daughter's case based on this new development. Officer Martinez glanced back at the busy crime scene. For now, there's nothing more you need to do here. We have your contact information, and we'll update you as soon as we know more. James nodded gently, pulling Emily closer. Thank you. We appreciate everything you're doing. Officer Martinez's expression softened momentarily as he added, I was on the original case team. I remember finding this truck. It's significant. It might finally give us the lead we need. Emily wiped away a tear with the back of her hand. Thank you for saying that. Come on, James said quietly to Emily. Let's go home. There's nothing more we can do here, and the police need to work. They called another taxi, and during the ride home, they sat in silence, holding hands tightly, each lost in their own thoughts. The taxi driver, sensing the tension, didn't attempt any conversation. At home, a strange sense of relief washed over them as they stepped through the front door. For the first time in years, they had a tangible connection to what happened, a piece of concrete evidence that might finally provide answers. I can't believe you found it, Emily said as they sat at the kitchen table with cups of untouched coffee between them. After all this time, just by chance. I keep thinking about how many times that truck might have been spotted if it had stayed on the road, James said, shaking his head. Do you think? Emily hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. Do you think this means we might finally find out what happened to her? James reached across the table to take her hand. I hope so. This is the biggest lead we've had in years. Emily squeezed his hand, a cautious smile forming on her lips. I feel like I can breathe again, James, like we're finally moving forward instead of being stuck in the same terrible moment for 6 years. They spent the evening discussing possibilities, theories, and hopes. For dinner, they ordered takeout from their favorite Italian restaurant, something they hadn't done since before Lily vanished. It wasn't exactly a celebration, but there was an energy in the house that had been missing for a long time. Later, they moved to the living room. James turned on the television to a mindless comedy show in an attempt to seek some normalcy, while Emily curled up next to him on the sofa, her head resting on his shoulder. The familiar weight and warmth of her against him felt like coming home after a long absence. I'm sorry about earlier, Emily said quietly during a commercial break. About the argument and for showing up at the junkyard after you told me not to. It's okay, James replied, stroking her hair gently. I understand why you came. I would have done the same thing. They fell into a comfortable silence, the tension that had existed earlier dissipating in the face of this new development. For the first time in years, they felt united by hope rather than divided by grief. As the evening progressed, the emotional exhaustion of the day caught up with them. James felt his eyelids growing heavy as the television droned on, and Emily's breathing had deepened beside him, indicating that she had fallen asleep. He didn't have the heart to wake her, so he remained still, letting the comfort of her presence and the flicker of hope in his heart lull him to sleep. For the first time in 6 years, he drifted off with a sense that they might finally get closure, that they might finally learn what happened to their little girl. James jolted awake, disoriented. The television was still on, playing an infomercial at low volume. The clock on the cable box read 11:42 p.m. He stretched his neck, stiff from the awkward position, and realized Emily was no longer beside him. Emily, he called out, his voice raspy from sleep. No answer came. He assumed she had gone up to bed, so he switched off the TV and made his way upstairs, his body heavy with exhaustion. The events at the junkyard now felt almost dreamlike, but the renewed hope remained. The hallway lights spilled from their bedroom door, which was partially open, so James pushed it wider, expecting to find Emily asleep. But instead, she was sitting at her desk, the blue glow of her computer screen illuminating her focused expression. Emily, what are you doing up? It's almost midnight, he asked. Startled by his presence, she replied, I couldn't sleep. Too many thoughts racing through my mind. James moved closer, glancing at her computer screen. She had Google Maps open, showing an aerial view of Thompson's salvage yard. And in another tab, she had pulled up public records related to George Thompson. "What's all this?" he asked, though he already had a sinking feeling about where this was heading. Emily turned back to the screen, clicking through various tabs. "I'm looking into George Thompson. Something about him felt off to me when I saw him today," she murmured. James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The police are handling this, Emily. They're investigating Thompson and everything related to the truck. But what if they miss something?" Her eyes brightened with a feverish intensity, the same look she got when she became fixated on a new lead or theory about the disappearance. While I was at the salvage yard today, there was something about the way he avoided eye contact, how nervous he seemed. "Of course he was nervous," James replied. "The police were swarming his business, investigating a possible connection to a child abduction. It was more than that," Emily insisted. "I've always had good intuition about people, James." "You know that," he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "The police have questioned him extensively. If they suspected him of involvement, they would have taken him in." "Look at this," she said, ignoring his attempt at reasoning, and pulled up a local news article from 3 years ago. George Thompson had been arrested for car registration fraud. He was selling vehicles with altered VIN numbers and forged paperwork. James leaned closer to read the article. Indeed, Thompson had been arrested and later convicted of the fraud scheme, receiving probation and a fine. "This proves he's not above illegal activity," Emily continued. "What if he knows more about the ice cream truck than he's telling the police? What if he's somehow involved?" she wondered aloud. "That's a big leap," James countered. "Getting caught in a car fraud scheme doesn't make someone a child abductor." "I'm not saying he did," Emily clarified, her voice tightening with frustration. "But what if he knows who did? What if he's protecting someone? The truck was in his salvage yard for years." "Years," James repeated, recalling all the time they had spent suffering, not knowing what happened to their daughter. "The police will investigate all of this. They're reopening the case based on finding the truck. We need to let them do their job, just as they did for the past 6 years." Emily's voice grew bitter. "They gave up on Lily. If you hadn't happened to go to that specific salvage yard today, we'd still have nothing. That's not fair. They followed every lead they had. Well, now I have a lead, and my gut tells me there's something not right about George Thompson." Emily turned back to her computer, clicking through more search results, while James stood up, his patience wearing thin. "I'm going to bed. You should too. We're both exhausted, and staying up all night researching a man the police are already investigating isn't going to help anyone." Emily didn't respond, her attention fixed on the screen. "Emily, go to bed," James urged. "I'll be there soon." But her tone told him otherwise. She was in one of her research spirals, and he knew from experience that she wouldn't stop until exhaustion forced her to. It had happened many times over the years. Emily becoming obsessed with a new angle or theory, staying up for days, piecing together information only to hit another dead end. He wanted to argue further to make her see reason, but he was simply too tired. The emotional roller coaster of the day had drained him completely. "Don't stay up too late," he said finally, pulling back the covers and sliding into bed. Emily murmured something non-committal, already engrossed in whatever she was reading. Despite his exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily for James. He drifted in and out of consciousness, aware of the soft tapping of Emily's keyboard and the occasional click of her mouse. At some point, he fell into a deeper sleep, the sounds fading into the background. When he awoke again, the bedroom was dark except for the dim glow of the digital clock that read 2:17 a.m. The computer was off, and Emily's side of the bed was empty and undisturbed. "Emily," he called out, pushing himself up on his elbows. No response came from the bathroom or hallway. James got out of bed, a sense of unease growing in his chest. He checked the bathroom, then moved through the upstairs rooms, calling Emily's name. The house remained silent. Downstairs, he found no sign of her either. Her purse was gone from its usual spot by the door, and her car keys were missing from the hook in the kitchen. Returning upstairs, James grabbed his phone from the nightstand and called Emily's number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. He tried again with the same result. Just as he was about to call a third time, a text message notification appeared on his screen. At the salvage yard. Had to check something. Don't worry. Staring at the message in disbelief, his concern quickly transformed into anger, then fear. What was she thinking? He muttered, realizing she had gone back to Thompson's salvage yard at 2 a.m. What if Thompson was somehow involved in Lily's disappearance? What if Emily was putting herself in danger? Without a car, since their sedan was still out of commission, which was why he had gone to the salvage yard in the first place. James cursed under his breath and called for a taxi, pacing anxiously on the front porch while he waited. His mind raced with scenarios, each worse than the last. What if Thompson is somehow involved in the disappearance? What if Emily is putting herself in danger? He wondered as the taxi finally arrived. "Can we hurry, please?" he asked the driver, his voice tense with urgency. "It's an emergency," he added. The driver nodded, sensing James's urgency, and pulled away from the curb with a bit more speed than usual. As the taxi drove through quiet, dark streets, James kept trying Emily's phone, each unanswered call increasing his anxiety. What had she discovered that was so important it couldn't wait until morning? What was she hoping to find at the salvage yard in the middle of the night? Whatever it was, he could only hope he would reach her before she got herself into trouble that he couldn't get her out of. When the taxi approached Thompson's salvage yard, its headlights cutting through the darkness of the early morning hours, James leaned forward, scanning the area for any sign of Emily's car. "Stop here, please," he instructed the driver when they were about 100 meters from the main entrance. He didn't want to risk alerting anyone to his presence by pulling up directly to the gate. After paying the driver, James stood on the deserted road, shivering slightly in the cool night air. The salvage yard loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the starlit sky. The main entrance was closed, with a heavy chain securing the gate. He spotted Emily's blue Honda parked just off the road, partially hidden behind a cluster of overgrown bushes. Relief washed over him at the confirmation that she was there, immediately followed by renewed concern about what she might be doing. Moving cautiously, James skirted around the perimeter of the salvage yard, staying in the shadows. The property was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire, but James knew from his earlier visit that there were likely spots where the fence was compromised. As he rounded the corner to the eastern edge of the property, he saw a figure crouched near the fence. Even in the darkness, he recognized Emily's slender form and the way she moved. "Emily," he whispered urgently as he approached. She whipped around, eyes wide with surprise. "James, what are you doing here?" "What am I doing here? What are you doing here?" he hissed, keeping his voice low. "It's the middle of the night. I told you I had a feeling about Thompson," she whispered back, gesturing toward the salvage yard. "Look, the lights are on in his office at 2:40 in the morning. Why would he be here unless he's hiding something or meeting someone?" James glanced toward the small building at the front of the yard. Indeed, lights glowed from the windows, casting yellow rectangles onto the gravel outside. "That doesn't mean anything," James argued, though he had to admit it was unusual. Maybe he's doing paperwork, or maybe he lives on the property. Either way, this is trespassing. "Emily, we should leave before we get arrested," he urged. "I'm not leaving," Emily said firmly. "Not when we're so close to finding answers. Close to what the police were handling. Apparently, they had impounded the truck and were investigating Thompson." "Shoo!" Emily suddenly grabbed his arm, pulling him down beside her. "Look," she whispered, and James followed her gaze to the back entrance of the salvage yard. Headlights appeared, moving slowly along the access road that led to the rear gate. A dark sedan pulled up, its engine cut off, but the lights remained on for a moment before plunging the area back into darkness. A tall figure emerged from the car, moving with purpose toward the rear gate. In the brief illumination from the headlights, they could make out a man, though details were hard to discern at this distance. The gate creaked open, apparently unlocked, and the man slipped inside, heading toward the lit office building where Thompson presumably waited. "You see," Emily whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and vindication. "Something's happening." James had to admit that this midnight meeting seemed suspicious. "We still shouldn't be here. If these people are involved in something illegal, we could be in danger." "We need to get closer," Emily insisted, ignoring his concern. We need to hear what they're saying." Before James could stop her, Emily moved along the fence line toward a section that appeared lower than the rest. With surprising agility, she hoisted herself up and over, dropping quietly to the ground inside the salvage yard. "Emily," James whispered desperately, left with no choice as he followed her over the fence, wincing as his jacket caught briefly on the wire at the top. Inside the yard, they moved silently between stacks of crushed cars and piles of scrap metal. The office building was about 50 meters away, and through the partially closed blinds they could see two silhouettes. Emily crept forward, motioning for James to follow. They made their way to the side of the building where a window was cracked open slightly, likely for ventilation in the stuffy space. From this position, they could hear voices drifting out into the night. "I told you to get rid of it years ago," a deep, unfamiliar voice said, anger evident in his tone. "I paid you good money to make that truck disappear." "I tried, man," Thompson's voice replied, defensive and slightly fearful. "Nobody would take it. Too recognizable with that paint job and ice cream cone on top, and shipping companies got suspicious when I tried to send it overseas. They said a vehicle tied to a crime needed special documentation. So instead, you just let it sit here where anyone could find it. It's been years. I didn't think anyone would recognize it after so long. It was tucked away in the back section. There was the sound of something being slammed, perhaps a fist on a desk. Well, now the police have it, and they're reopening the whole investigation," the unfamiliar voice growled. "If they trace it back to me, they won't," Thompson interrupted. "I told them I barely remember the guy who brought it in, just that he was black, middle-aged. That's it. And they believed you. I think so. They took the truck, but they didn't find anything in it. No evidence. I made sure of that years ago." The conversation continued, and Emily and James exchanged shocked glances. This confirmed their worst fears. The truck was deliberately hidden, and these men knew it was connected to a crime. Emily leaned closer to the window, straining to hear more. But as she did, her weight shifted, causing her to press against the old iron gate that ran alongside the building. The hinges, rusty from years of exposure to the elements, let out a loud creak that cut through the night air. Inside, the conversation abruptly stopped. "What was that?" the unfamiliar voice demanded. "Is someone there?" "Probably just an animal," Thompson said, though his voice tensed. "Let me check." Emily tugged at James's sleeve, panic in her eyes. "We need to move now," she urged. James pulled her away from the window, and they crouched behind a stack of tires as the office door swung open. Thompson stepped out, a flashlight in his hand sweeping its beam across the yard. "Who's out there?" he called into the darkness. "This is private property." James and Emily remained perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe as the light passed just above their hiding spot. Emily's hand found James's, squeezing it tightly. Inside the office, they could hear the other man moving around, seemingly gathering his things. "I'm leaving," he announced. "Fix this, Thompson. If I go down for this, you're coming with me." The flashlight beam swung back toward the office as Thompson turned. "It'll be fine. They've got nothing solid. The truck's clean." As Thompson went back inside, James tugged at Emily's hand, indicating they should use this opportunity to escape. She nodded, and they began slowly making their way back toward the fence through which they had entered. Behind them, they could hear the office door open again and footsteps on gravel as the mysterious visitor headed back to his car. The engine started, headlights cutting through the darkness once more as the sedan reversed and drove away through the back entrance. Emily had already pulled out her phone and was dialing 911 with trembling fingers. As we reached the fence, she whispered urgently into the phone, "I need to report suspicious activity at Thompson's salvage yard. I overheard a conversation about hiding evidence related to a kidnapping case, my daughter's kidnapping case." The 911 dispatcher responded with immediate concern, the gravity of the situation apparent in her tone. "Ma'am, are you in a safe location?" "We're outside the salvage yard now," Emily whispered, glancing back to ensure they weren't being followed. "My husband and I overheard everything." The salvage yard owner, George Thompson, was talking to another man about the ice cream truck that was found earlier today, the one connected to your daughter, Lily Carter's disappearance 6 years ago. The dispatcher's voice sharpened with recognition. The Carter case, I see in our system. Were you able to identify the second individual? No, it was too dark to see his face clearly, but they were definitely discussing hiding evidence and the fact that the truck was deliberately concealed here. Officers are being dispatched to your location now, the dispatcher assured her. They'll be there in approximately 5 minutes. Please remain where you are if it's safe, or move to a more secure location if you feel threatened. The night was eerily silent as they waited, the distant hum of traffic on the highway the only sound. Michael, James, in this new narrative, kept his arm around Emily's shoulders, both for warmth and reassurance. I can't believe we actually heard them talking about it, Emily said, her voice a mix of horror and vindication. All these years, that truck was just sitting there while we knew what happened to Lily. We don't know exactly what they know, James cautioned, though his heart raced with the same suspicions. But they definitely knew the truck was evidence in a crime. Within minutes, the flash of blue and red lights appeared in the distance. 2 police cruisers approached without sirens, moving swiftly but quietly toward the salvage yard. 4 officers emerged, their expressions serious as they assessed the situation. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, one officer, a tall woman with short brown hair, now known as Officer Johnson, stepped forward. We understand you witnessed a suspicious conversation regarding evidence in your daughter's case. Emily quickly recounted what they had overheard, while James added details about the mysterious visitor in his car, a dark sedan, probably black or navy, whose license plate he couldn't make out, though it looked fairly new, perhaps a Lexus or high-end Toyota. Officer Johnson nodded, gesturing to her colleagues as 2 officers moved toward the salvage yard entrance. You mentioned the visitor was planning to leave. Did you see which direction he went? She asked. He left through the back entrance, James said, pointing. Headed east, I think. Johnson, alert all units in the area to be on the lookout for a dark sedan leaving this vicinity. Officer Johnson instructed in her radio, mentioning a possible connection to the Carter kidnapping case. Meanwhile, another officer was already working on the gate lock using bolt cutters to remove the chain. Within moments, they had access to the salvage yard. Stay here, Officer Johnson told the Carters firmly. We'll handle this. Emily clutched James's hand as they watched the officers move cautiously into the yard, firearms at the ready. The office light was still on, suggesting Thompson remained inside. Minutes passed in tense silence until raised voices followed by the crackle of radio communication. More police cruisers arrived, their lights illuminating the entire area. Officer Johnson emerged from the salvage yard, approaching the Carters with a measured expression. We've detained Mr. Thompson, she informed them. Based on your report and his initial responses to questioning, we have reason to believe he was complicit in concealing evidence related to your daughter's case. Emily gasped softly, leaning against James for support. What about the other man? James asked. We've put out an APB for the vehicle you described, Officer Johnson replied. All units in the area are on alert. She paused and continued with careful professionalism. During questioning, Mr. Thompson revealed that the visitor was named Marcus Black. We've run his information through our database and discovered he has prior charges related to child exploitation. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry of distress. James felt his knees weaken, but forced himself to remain, standing to be strong for both of them. We're dispatching units to Marcus Black's last known address immediately, Officer Johnson continued. Given the nature of his previous charges and the connection to the ice cream truck, he's now our primary suspect in your daughter's abduction. The reality of what was happening crashed over James like a wave. After 6 years of dead ends and fading hope, they suddenly had a name, a suspect, a real lead. There's something else you should know, Officer Johnson added, her expression softening slightly. We've also sent officers to search Marcus Black's property thoroughly. If there's any evidence of what happened to Lily or any possibility that she might still be there, we'll find out. The implication hung in the air between them. For the first time in years, there was a real possibility that Lily might still be alive. I think you should come to the station to give a formal statement, Officer Johnson continued. We'll need a detailed account of exactly what you heard tonight. James nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Emily was trembling beside him, tears streaming down her face. Can we follow you there? James finally managed to ask. Of course, we'll escort you, Officer Johnson replied. As they moved toward their car, the salvage yard now fully illuminated by police lights and activity, Emily suddenly stopped and turned to James. What if she's alive? Her voice was barely audible, filled with a fragile hope that seemed almost too painful to acknowledge. What if we find her tonight? James pulled her into a tight embrace, his own eyes filling with tears. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, he whispered, though his heart was racing with the same desperate hope. One step at a time. They drove to the police station in silence, following a police cruiser with its lights flashing. The familiar route through town seemed different somehow, as if the entire world had shifted on its axis. Behind them, more police vehicles headed in the direction of what they now knew was Marcus Black's address. At the station, they were escorted to an interview room where they provided detailed statements about everything they had witnessed. As they finished, the door opened and a familiar face entered. Agent Smith from the FBI, looking as though he had been roused from sleep but was fully alert. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, he greeted them with a solemn nod. I came as soon as I heard. We've had a major development in the case. Agent Smith pulled up a chair across from James and Emily, his expression professionally neutral, but there was something in his eyes, a glimmer of intensity that made James's heart race. What's happening? Emily asked, leaning forward. Did they find Marcus Black? We did, Agent Smith confirmed. Officers had apprehended him as he attempted to leave his residence with packed bags. He's in custody now, being questioned. James exhaled slowly, a mixture of relief and apprehension washing over him as he wondered. And his house? Are they searching it? Agent Smith exchanged a glance with Officer Johnson, who had remained in the room. Yes, Agent Smith said carefully. A full forensic team is there now, along with additional officers. Emily gripped James's hand so tightly it hurt and pressed her voice barely above a whisper. Have they found anything? Before Agent Smith could answer, there was a knock at the door. Another officer leaned in, gesturing for Agent Smith to step outside. The agent excused himself, leaving James and Emily in agonizing suspense. Something's happening, Emily murmured, her eyes fixed on the door. They found something. I can feel it. James couldn't speak. His throat constricted and his heart hammered against his ribs. The past 6 years, the pain, the loss, the gradual fading of hope, seemed to culminate in this moment. Minutes crawled by like hours as Emily paced the small room while James remained seated, too numb to move. Finally, the door opened again and Agent Smith returned. His expression changed, imbued with a gravity that hadn't been there before. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, he began, I need to tell you something, and I need you to prepare yourselves. Emily sank back in her chair, her face pale. James reached for her hand automatically. During the search of Marcus Black's residence, officers discovered a basement area that was locked from the outside. Agent Smith paused, choosing his words carefully. Inside that basement, they found your daughter, Lily. The room seemed to tilt. Emily made a half-gasp, half-sob sound, her free hand flying to her mouth. She's alive. James managed to ask, his voice cracking. Agent Smith nodded. Yes, she's alive. The simple confirmation shattered something inside both of them. Emily collapsed against James, sobbing uncontrollably, while he held her tightly, his own tears flowing freely as he tried to process the magnitude of what he was hearing. Where is she? Emily finally asked through her tears. Is she okay? Can we see her? She's being transported here now, Agent Smith explained. Paramedics are with her, and we have victim services coordinators accompanying her as well. She'll need medical attention, and there will be extensive psychological evaluations. But physically, she appears to be in stable condition. Oh, thank God, Emily whispered, closing her eyes briefly. Thank God she's alive. Agent Smith's expression remained somber. There's something else you need to know. and I wish there were an easier way to tell you this." He took a deep breath. Based on her physical condition and preliminary statements she made to the officers who found her, it appears that she has been subjected to ongoing abuse during her captivity, and she appears to be pregnant. Emily's face fell as the words hit James like a physical blow. Beside him, Emily made a pained sound, her body tensing. "Ow!" James began, but couldn't finish the question. "We don't have all the details yet," Agent Smith said gently. "Marcus Black isn't talking, and we're being very careful with how we question him. But from what we can piece together, she's been held captive in that basement for most of the past 6 years." "And the pregnancy?" Emily asked, her voice hollow. "We believe Marcus Black is responsible," Agent Smith confirmed grimly. "The medical team will determine how far along she is and assess her overall health, but from visual estimation, she appears to be in her second trimester." James felt physically ill. The joy of knowing Lily was alive collided violently with the horror of what she had endured and what she was still enduring. His daughter, who had been 8 years old when she disappeared, was now a teenager carrying her captor's child. "We'll get you both victim services support as well," Agent Smith continued. "This is an incredibly difficult situation, and you'll need guidance on how to proceed, how to help her recover from this trauma." "Will he go to prison?" Emily asked suddenly, a hardness in her voice that James had never heard before. "Will he pay for what he did to our daughter? With the evidence we have, the truck, Thompson's testimony, and most importantly finding Lily in his home along with his prior record, Marcus Black will almost certainly face multiple life sentences," Agent Smith assured them. "The district attorney is already preparing to charge him with kidnapping, false imprisonment, child endangerment, and numerous other felonies. He will never walk free again." James nodded, trying to focus on this small mercy, that the monster who had stolen their daughter's childhood would pay for his crimes. "When can we see her?" he asked, his voice steadier now. "Very soon," Agent Smith promised. "She should arrive within the next 20 minutes. We've set up a quiet room where you can reunite with her. I should prepare you, though. She's been through an unimaginable ordeal. She may not react the way you expect. She may be frightened, confused, even distant. The psychological impact of long-term captivity is profound." "We understand," Emily said, wiping away tears. "We just want to see her, to let her know she's safe now, that we've never stopped looking for her." Agent Smith nodded, his professional demeanor softening slightly. For what it's worth, when the officers told her they were taking her to see her parents, she recognized that concept. She asked if they meant her mom and dad. That's a positive sign that she remembers you and her life before the abduction. This small detail broke something open in James's chest, a mixture of gratitude and grief that Lily had held onto the memory of them through her nightmare. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of administrative details, preparations, and introductions to victim services coordinators who would be supporting them in the coming days and weeks. Throughout it all, James and Emily held on to each other, anchored in the impossible reality that their daughter was coming back to them. Finally, a gentle knock came at the door. Officer Johnson entered, her expression somber but kind. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, Lily has arrived. She's in room 4 with the medical team and our child psychologist. If you're ready, you can see her now." They stood together, legs unsteady. Emily smoothed her hair with trembling hands, as if preparing for a formal occasion rather than the most significant moment of their lives. "Just remember," Officer Johnson said softly as she led them down the hallway, "take it slowly. Let her set the pace for interaction. She's been through a tremendous trauma, and this is all very overwhelming for her." They paused outside a door marked simply with the number 4. James could hear murmured voices inside, professional, calm, and caring. His heart thundered in his chest. Officer Johnson knocked gently, then opened the door. "Lily, your parents are here to see you," she announced. James and Emily stepped into the room, and time seemed to stop. In the center of the room, sitting on an examination table with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, was their daughter. No longer the small child from the Ring camera footage, but now a teenager with the same dark eyes and high cheekbones that had always reminded James of Emily's mother. Her hair was longer and unkempt, her face paler and thinner than the round-cheeked girl in their memories, and visible beneath the blanket was the unmistakable swell of her pregnant belly. But it was Lily. There she looked up at them, her eyes widening with recognition and something else. Uncertainty, fear perhaps, but also a flicker of hope. "Mom, Dad." Her voice was small and hesitant, as if testing out the words after years of disuse. Emily managed a soft, choked sound, taking a tentative step forward. "Yes, sweetheart, it's us." James felt as if he could not move, overwhelmed by the sight of the daughter he had feared he would never see again. Lily's lower lip trembled, and suddenly she began crying, her shoulders shaking beneath the blanket. "You found me," she whispered. "You really found me." That broke the spell. James and Emily rushed forward, mindful not to move too quickly or frighten her, yet unable to resist the magnetic pull toward their child. They embraced her gently, all three dissolving into tears, holding each other as if afraid they might be torn apart again. "We never stopped looking for you," Emily promised softly, stroking Lily's hair. "Never. Not for one day. You're safe now," James added, his voice thick with emotion. "You're safe, and we're going to take care of you. Everything's going to be okay." In that moment, despite all the challenges that lay ahead, despite the trauma and pain they would all need to process, James allowed himself to believe those words. Their daughter was alive. She was home. They were a family again, and nothing else mattered. After the emotional reunion, the medical staff gently suggested that Lily needed to complete her examination and receive proper care. The Carters were then led to another room, a more comfortable space with sofas and a small table where coffee and water had been provided. Agent Smith joined them shortly after, along with a woman who introduced herself as Dr. Anderson, a psychologist specializing in trauma recovery for abduction victims. "First, I want to say how truly remarkable this outcome is," Dr. Anderson began, her voice gentle but professional. "Long-term abduction cases rarely end with the victim being found alive, especially after so many years. You've beaten tremendous odds." James nodded silently, still processing the reality of having Lily back. Emily wiped away tears that seemed endless. "While we complete her medical evaluation, I'd like to talk with you about what to expect in the coming days and weeks," Dr. Anderson continued. "This won't be easy for any of you, and it's important that you're prepared. We'll do whatever she needs," Emily said firmly. "Whatever it takes to help her heal." Dr. Anderson smiled gently. "That's exactly the right attitude. But I want to be very clear, the road ahead will be long and difficult. Lily has spent 6 formative years in captivity, subjected to manipulation, isolation, and abuse. Her understanding of relationships, and even of herself, has been profoundly affected. Will she ever be the same?" James asked hesitantly. "No, she won't be the same child you lost 6 years ago," Dr. Anderson explained compassionately. "But with proper support, therapy, and your unconditional love, she can heal and build a fulfilling life." "Agent Smith," James interjected, "what about the case?" "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Agent Smith replied. "Right now, our priority is Lily's immediate well-being." Dr. Anderson nodded approvingly. "Exactly right. The legal process will unfold at its own pace, but Lily's recovery can't wait. She'll need to begin therapy immediately, and you'll need guidance on how to support her at home." "When can we take her home?" Emily suddenly asked, looking alarmed. "She's coming home with us, isn't she?" "Yes, absolutely," Dr. Anderson assured her. "But she'll need to remain at the hospital tonight for observation and a comprehensive medical assessment. Assuming there are no immediate health concerns, you should be able to bring her home tomorrow. We'll need to prepare a room." James realized aloud. "It's still set up for an 8-year-old. "That's something we should discuss," Dr. Anderson said. "Lily may find comfort in familiar things from her childhood, or she might feel infantilized by them. It's important to give her choices so she can restore the sense of control that was taken from her during captivity." The conversation continued, covering practical arrangements for Lily's return home, recommendations for therapy, and resources for the family. Throughout it all, James felt a surreal detachment, as if he were watching a movie about someone else's life. until the crushing pressure of Emily's hand has reminded him that this was real. They had found their daughter, and now they needed to help her rebuild her life. As the meeting wound down, Agent Smith stood to leave. I'll update you on any developments in the case. The protection detail will remain in place until we're certain there are no additional threats to your safety. Thank you, James, he said sincerely, standing to shake the agent's hand. Agent Smith's professional demeanor softened slightly. I've been in law enforcement for 23 years, and days like today, when we actually find someone alive and can reunite a family, are rare. I'm very glad for you all. After Agent Smith departed, Dr. Anderson spent additional time answering their questions and providing resources. She promised to meet with them again tomorrow to help facilitate Lily's transition home. Later that evening, after a series of consultations with medical staff and psychologists, James and Emily were finally allowed to see Lily again. They found her in a quiet examination room, wearing clean hospital clothes, her hair damp from a recent shower. The transformation was subtle but significant. Some of the haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by exhaustion and uncertainty. A kind-looking nurse finished taking her blood pressure and smiled encouragingly at the Carters. The doctor will be in shortly to discuss Lily's care plan. I'll give you some privacy for now, the nurse said as she stepped out. James and Emily approached their daughter carefully, mindful of Dr. Anderson's advice not to overwhelm her with physical affection unless she initiated it. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Emily asked gently, taking a seat beside Lily's bed. Lily shrugged slightly, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of the blanket covering her lap, looking tired and confused. The doctor asked me a lot of questions, Lily said softly. That's to help them take good care of me. James explained carefully, choosing his words. A heavy silence fell between them, one filled with unspoken questions and emotions, until Emily noticed Lily's gaze darting toward the door as if checking for threats. Lily, Emily said hesitantly, if you feel up to it, could you tell us what happened that day when you disappeared? You don't have to if it's too difficult. Lily's eyes grew distant, as if looking back through time. I remember some parts, she said after a moment, her voice soft. Not everything. James and Emily exchanged glances, both afraid to push too hard yet desperate to understand. I wanted ice cream. Lily continued unprompted. It was hot that day. There was an ice cream truck playing music. I asked you for money, Mom, but you were in the shower. Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I remember I told you to wait until I was done, but you didn't wait, Lily said, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. I had some money in my pocket, quarters from my allowance, but it wasn't enough for 2 ice creams. I wanted to get one for you too. Emily covered her mouth, stifling a sound of distress. Then the ice cream man said he would give me a free one. He told me to come inside the truck to choose from special flavors, Lily continued. James forced himself to remain calm, though rage and grief churned inside him the thought of this predator luring his innocent daughter. Then he changed, Lily said, her gaze now fixed on her hands. He got angry. He closed the door and started driving. I tried to scream, but he said if I made noise, he would hurt me. Oh, baby, he whispered, and then he took me to his house, the basement. Lily's voice became mechanical, as if she were reciting facts about someone else. He said you sent me away because I was bad, because I didn't listen. He said you didn't want me anymore. James interjected, unable to stop himself. We never stopped looking for you, Lily. Never. I knew he was lying, Lily whispered, a hint of her old self visible in her eyes. At first I believed him a little, but then I realized he was just saying it to make me stop asking to go home. I felt relief knowing, somehow, that you would never abandon me. Emily reached out tentatively, and when Lily didn't pull away, she placed her hand gently over her daughter's. You don't have to tell us everything right now, Emily said softly. There'll be time to talk about it when you're ready. Lily nodded, seemingly relieved. The police said he's in jail now, that he can't get out. That's right, James confirmed firmly. He's going to prison for what he did to you for a very, very long time. He'll never hurt you or anyone else again. Lily's hand moved unconsciously to her swollen belly. What about the baby? The question hung in the air, loaded with implications none of them were prepared to fully address yet. "That's something we'll figure out together," Emily said carefully. "Whatever you want to do, whatever you need, we'll support you. You're not alone anymore." The doctor then said, "It's a girl," and Lily added quietly, "I've been thinking about her. She didn't do anything wrong, even if he did." The maturity and compassion in her statement stunned James. Despite everything she had endured, his daughter had somehow retained her capacity for empathy. "No, she didn't," Emily agreed softly. "None of this is her fault, just like none of it is your fault." Lily's eyes filled with tears. "I was scared you wouldn't want me back because of what happened, because I'm different now." "Listen to me," James said, moving closer and gently taking her hand. "You are our daughter. Nothing could ever change that. Nothing that happened to you, nothing that man did, nothing about this pregnancy changes how much we love you. We love you completely. We always have and we always will," Emily added, her voice steady despite her tears. Lily's composure finally broke as she began to sob deep, wrenching cries that seemed to come from the very core of her being. James and Emily moved instinctively to embrace her, cradling her between them as she released 6 years of fear, pain, and loneliness. "It's okay," Emily murmured, stroking Lily's hair. "Let out. We're here, and we're not going anywhere." Through her tears, Lily managed to speak. "I used to imagine this being a rescue, coming home. I would pretend you were looking for me, that someday you'd find me." "We were looking," James assured her, his voice breaking. "Every single day. I can see it in your faces," Lily whispered. They held each other for what felt like hours, the hospital room fading away as their broken, damaged, but somehow still intact family began the long process of healing. Eventually, Lily's tears subsided, and exhaustion overtook her. The doctor returned, explaining that she needed rest and that they could continue their reunion tomorrow when she was taken home. As Lily drifted to sleep, James and Emily stood at her bedside, watching the rise and fall of her chest. A simple miracle they had once feared they would never witness again. "She's really here," Emily murmured, as if afraid that speaking too loudly might shatter the reality. "Our little girl came back to us." James nodded, unable to find words adequate for the moment. The joy of her return existed alongside the horror of what she had endured, creating an emotional landscape for which he had no map. But as he watched his daughter sleep, no longer the child of their memories, but a young woman who had survived the unimaginable, he made a silent vow. They would help her rebuild her life. They would love her through the nightmares, the therapy sessions, the legal battles, and the decisions about the baby growing inside her. They would relearn how to be a family in this new reality. "We should let her rest," the doctor said softly as she appeared at the doorway. "You can come back first thing in the morning. We'll have her discharge papers ready." Emily nodded, leaning down to place a gentle kiss on Lily's forehead. "Sleep well, sweetheart. We'll be back soon." James followed suit, whispering, "We love you, Lily. You're safe now." As they reluctantly left the room, James placed his arm around Emily's shoulders, drawing strength from her presence. The future held countless challenges and uncertainties, but one thing was clear. Their daughter had returned to them against impossible odds. Whatever came next, they would face it together,